The Mirror's Curse. It all began with a mirror, a large, ornate thing that looked like it belonged in a palace rather than in the dusty attic of an old farmhouse. No one knew how it ended up there, and it had been forgotten for years, until the day Daniel found it. Daniel had recently moved into his late grandmother's home, planning to renovate it before selling it. The house was old, creaky, and smelled of mildew, but it was quiet. On his second day of cleaning, he discovered the mirror behind some old boxes. It was tall, with a heavy wooden frame carved with strange symbols that made his skin prickle. Something about the mirror felt wrong. The glass was too clear, too reflective, almost like it was staring back at him. But Daniel shrugged it off as an oddity of the past, and with some effort, he dragged it downstairs, deciding it might be worth something. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept hearing faint noises, soft footsteps creaking on the wooden floors, quiet whispers that he couldn't quite understand. Several times he got up to check the house, but nothing seemed out of place. The next day, while fixing up the living room, he glanced at the mirror. His reflection stared back, but something was off. He blinked. His reflection didn't. For a split second, it stood still, staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Daniel jumped back, heart pounding. He shook his head and looked again. This time, his reflection moved normally, mimicking his every movement. Just tired, he told himself, laughing nervously. I must have imagined it. But over the next few days, things got worse. At night, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, coming from the direction of the mirror. He'd walk into the living room and feel a chill in the air, like someone or something was watching him. Sometimes he'd see movement out of the corner of his eye, but when he turned, nothing was there, except the mirror reflecting the empty room. One night, as Daniel lay in bed, he heard the whispering again. This time, it was clear. It wasn't just noise, it was calling his name. Daniel, come closer. His breath hitched. The voice was soft, almost pleading, and seemed to echo from the living room. His pulse quickened, but despite the fear curling in his gut, he felt compelled to investigate. Slowly, he got out of bed and crept down the stairs. The house was cold and silent, save for the quiet, persistent call. When he reached the living room, the mirror stood there in the dark, reflecting the faint glow of the moonlight from the window. But something was wrong. There was a figure in the mirror. It wasn't him. It was a shadowy, twisted version of himself, standing in the center of the reflection, staring back at him with hollow eyes, its mouth curled into a sickening smile. Daniel's heart raced, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He turned to flee, but his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen in place, eyes locked with the figure in the mirror. The figure began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its hand and pointed directly at him. Come closer, it whispered, its voice low and distorted. Daniel's feet moved on their own, slowly carrying him toward the mirror. No matter how much he fought, his body was no longer his own. He was being drawn in. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers swirled around him, louder now, almost deafening. As he neared the mirror, the figure's smile widened, its eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. When he was just inches away, it pressed its hand against the glass. Daniel felt the cold seep into his bones. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Suddenly, the figure lunged. Its hand reached through the glass, grabbing Daniel's wrist with a grip like iron. He screamed, but no sound came out. The figure yanked him forward, pulling him into the mirror. Everything went black. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was standing in the living room, but everything was wrong. The room was dark, cold, and distorted. The furniture looked decayed, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if no one had lived there for years. And then he saw it, the mirror. On the other side, he saw the living room as it truly was, bathed in moonlight. And in the reflection, standing in the real world, was a man who looked exactly like him. The other Daniel. He watched in horror as the doppelganger smirked, waved, and walked away, leaving him trapped in the mirror. He pounded on the glass, screaming, but no one could hear him. He was alone in the dark, cold world behind the mirror, with no way out. Days passed, maybe weeks. Time didn't seem to exist in this place. Every now and then, Daniel would see someone, a visitor or a potential buyer, come into the house, but no one ever stayed long. One evening, a young couple moved in. Daniel watched helplessly from the other side of the mirror as they settled into the house, blissfully unaware of the evil lurking within. And then one night, the woman found the mirror. She smiled, admiring its strange beauty. From behind the glass, Daniel saw his reflection standing behind her, smiling that same twisted smile. And then, just as it had for him, the whispers began again.